I'm Tabitha Redder. I'm here with EIJ News, and this is Patti Newberry. She serves on the SPJ Governance Task Force. We're going to be discussing the proposed SPJ bylaw change that delegates will be voting on later this week. So before we delve into that, Patti, can you tell me what the Governance Task Force does?
We were formed about a year ago to look at how the SPJ board works and how it's structured. So over the course of a year and a half, we've been studying that, talking to a lot of people, collecting feedback about what works in terms of the size and structure of the board and what doesn't work.
Okay. So with that being said, I know there are some proposal changes that we'll be voting on later this week. So can you explain the specific one? It's dealing with removing the regional directors from the organizational structure. Is that right?
Yes, that is. So the proposal calls for reducing the board from 23 to 9. And as part of that, the regional directors would be removed from the board. There are 12 regions of SPJ, each represented by a regional director. The thought is that, the philosophy is that the world is a very small place with constant contact through electronic means, and that the geographic representational model really is no longer very relevant. That where you come from doesn't matter as much as it once did. That whether you're a chapter in the Fort Worth, Dallas area, or a chapter at Miami of Ohio, or a pro chapter in Eugene, Oregon, the issues that you're facing are really not specific to your geography. So that was one of the reasons we felt as though that was a group of individuals who no longer had to have a specific seat on the board.
Okay.
But I would say the bigger motivation here is not to kick off the regional directors. It's nothing punitive at all. The wider goal here is to have a smaller and more strategically focused board. With 23 members, it becomes very difficult to stay on track, to move forward in unison, and we are often pulled aside by individuals' agendas. Right, so somebody wants to talk about this, and then we're off to the races on that, and somebody thinks this is important, and we're off to the races on that. We have just not had the tradition or the will, frankly, to create a strategic plan, a plan that says in the next 3 to 5 years, this is what SPJ as an organization should be doing and shouldn't be doing, right? And so the belief is to get to that more strategic place and be a board that truly directs the strategy and the future of the organization. It will work better with fewer persons, right? It'll be easier to accomplish, and that much of the work of the board, the tasks of the board, would be more efficiently handled at the next layer down. Committees, communities, an RD structure, a regional structure that will remain intact, ad hoc groups, any number of different bodies that can carry out the actual work that supports the strategy that a board would set.
Okay. So that being said, are there any downsides to the proposal change?
Well, I think some people are very married to the long-standing representational model of the SPJ board, that, oh, we have a campus representative, we have a student representative, we have 12 regional representatives. And so I think that there are some people who are not at ease. They feel ill at ease about that aspect. But as part of the proposal, we, the task force, are recommending that a newly constituted board create very clear pipelines, very clear lines of communication between all the various constituencies of the society and the board. So if the bylaws pass on Saturday, over 3 years, we're going to reduce from 23 to 9 members, and 3 would be officers, president, president-elect, secretary-treasurer, and then 4 would be at-large positions. And our recommendation would be that each of those at-large directors have certain designated responsibilities. You're the at-large director who is the the conduit with our communities. You're the at-large director working with our committees, you're the at-large director with our regions, and then any other needs that we would have. So that everybody knows who talks to who to get the information up and down the organizational chart. Somebody could come to the floor with an amendment on Saturday during the delegates meeting, and we'll deal with that when it comes. But the only amendment that's been brought to our attention is from the Press Club of Long Island, and they are seeking to have a guarantee of a regional voice on the board. And so the way they've structured it is that if a regional director is not elected as an at-large, like concurrently serving as a regional director and an at-large, that then one of the two appointed positions of the board would go to a regional director, which actually we're now calling regional coordinator. And so that is to guarantee that the regional perspective be part of the board population. Our task force doesn't support that for the reasons that I've stated. We feel like representational model is no longer needed in SPJ, and we feel like if the new board follows our recommendation to create these lines of communication, that will take care of itself, right? That there will be a voice for regions and importantly the chapters. So I would say to that, that I'm happy that any any chapter or any delegate comes forward with any other ideas on how to tweak this proposal, and that there is, in my mind, there's absolutely no chance that a new, smaller board would not have the interests of the regions and the chapters under those regions as its highest priority. Right? We are built in we have a structure. We have a chapter and a regional structure. That's not changing. That's going forward. We have 50 to 60 professional chapters, 120 to 150 student chapters. Those are intact, right? So there's absolutely no way that the board would abandon its dedication to our chapter structure and the regional structure that supports the chapters. It's who we are. It's our foundation. That's where our members come from. So I understand the concern that maybe there would be a diminished voice for the regional directors if they're not guaranteed a spot on the board. But I just don't see that as being the end result of all of this.
Are there any smaller policies that are being proposed changes as well?
No, you mean outside of the task forces or the bylaws change? So the bylaws changes revolve wholly around this change to reduce the size of the board, and really only reduce the size of the board by what we just outlined. In terms of how the new board, a new smaller board would then operate, those are really just recommendations of our task force. And while we think they're sound recommendations and would have every hope that they would be considered very seriously, a new board is going to do what a new board will do in terms of a policy, right? If the new board doesn't think, we're going to vote in this policy with, this change, 3 officers, 4 at large, and 2 appointed. So that's a total of 9, right? And the new seated board might go, well, no, the best way to have communication is not the way the task force recommended, it's a different way. So that could happen, right? But really the bylaws changes revolve only or relate only to the downsizing of the board. What that looks like in actual practice then becomes the next phase of the whole process. The new smaller board is going to have to determine how it's going to get to a strategic focus and good communication throughout the entire organization.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I really think that is, I'm trying to see if I got everything.
Yeah. So we're really hopeful because we've had very little negative feedback to this point. We're very hopeful that it will win the approval of the delegates on Saturday afternoon, and then the hard work of moving forward and making it work begins. But the board overall, as it sits today, supports it, not quite unanimously, but strongly, right? Just a couple of folks who have concerns that didn't allow them to endorse the whole plan. So I think it's a really exciting time for SPJ. We've got a lot of things happening at the top of the organization with Joe Skeel leaving, Chris Vachon leaving. Those are giant decisions and giant occupations of the board. But I think all of these things will coalesce and come together to move us to the next level of being the leading voice for journalism in the country.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.